তাই জাগে জাগে আমার গান আকাশ ভরা অসীম কালে যে হিল্লোলে জোয়ার ভাটায় ভুবন দোলে অসীম কালে যে হিল্লোলে জোয়ার ভাটায় ভুবন দোলে নারীতে মোর রক্ত ধারায় লেগেছে তার টান বিস্ময়ে তাই জাগে জাগে আমার গান আকাশ ভরা ঘাসে ঘাসে পা ফেলেছি বনের পথে যেতে
ফুলের গন্ধে চমক লেগে উঠেছে মন মেতে
ছড়িয়ে আছে আনন্দেরই দান বিস্ময়ে তাই জাগে জাগে আমার গান কান পেতেছি চোখ মেলেছি ধরার বুকে প্রাণ ঢেলেছি জানার মাঝে অজানারে করেছি সন্ধান বিস্ময়ে তাই জাগে জাগে আমার গান আকাশ ভরা সূর্য তারা বিশ্ব ভরা প্রাণ তাহারি মাঝখানে আমি পেয়েছি মোর স্থান বিস্ময়ে তাই জাগে জাগে আমার গান আকাশ ভরা
Dr. Sen, thank you so much for your marvelous address. I also want to thank the students of UBC who performed the music in honor of Dr. Sen. Their names, along with the names of the music that you just heard, are listed in the back of the program. I now invite Dr. Paul Evans, Director of the Institute of Asian Research, to introduce the next part of our program.
It would be unwise for us to have Amartya Sen with us without not just listening to his words, but challenging some of his words. The concept of public reasoning, an idea that's been integral to another book that he didn't address today, his own book, The Idea of Justice, is one that is grabbing our attention. And as we were discussing who would be the right person to help us celebrate the life of and the thinking of Rabindranath Tagore, Amartya Sen came to mind, not only because of his interdisciplinary work, but because of his engagement with the issues of the world. As we heard in the introduction, as all in the audience are aware, this is a career and a mind that has connected high philosophy, high theory, to a world of practical living. And to have heard the music we just did, which reminds us of the complexity of life and the beauty of it, as well as some of the harder sides that Dr. Sen has written about in treatment of famine and in treatment of poverty and the problem the world addresses, we couldn't think of a better person that would have brought together a place. He comes out of an extraordinary tradition of intellectual thinking in Bengal. Tagore was not just a philosophic and intellectual influence on Amartya Sen, he actually gave him his name. And the presence in a deep way, I think, as much in the aspiration of your career and your life as what you've accomplished, brings Tagore, brings interdisciplinarity together. Now, having said that, this shouldn't be too solemn an event. And the opportunity to not just listen to good words, but to have the chance to interrogate them a wee bit. And to do that, we had been thinking for some weeks about the right kind of event where some of the ideas of our faculty and our students could be brought into the interrogation of Amartya Sen. And what we agreed on was 3 students out of several who submitted questions to us, people who have read your work, understood it, and want to take issue and clarify some aspects of it. So without further ado, I'm going to invite 3 students who are from the Interdisciplinary Studies Graduate Program or our Masters of Asia-Pacific Policy Studies Program. Yes, interdisciplinarity and policy go together, if policy means that engagement with the world. They did not know the text of the speech as they were generating their questions. None of us did. We didn't know that this was going to be about some strange Scotsman named Smith as well as a Bengali Tagore. So you might have thrown them, to use the American expression, a bit of a curveball with the presentation, but they're ready to go, and look forward to your reactions. We have about 15 minutes. We'll have 3 or 4 questions. And let me begin with Aisun Sageti. Please, Aisun, join us.
Dr. Sen, today you refer to Rabindranath Tagore as well as in your Nobel banquet speech, appreciating his universalities and tolerance and rationalities ideal that have influenced your thinking, particularly in divisive time. In these times where religious intolerance is prominent in our world, such as Islamophobia, what suggestions do you have to think and act according to the ideas that you believe are embedded by Tagore?
Well, I don't quite know how Tagore would react, but he did react to other kinds of religious intolerance in India and elsewhere, and intolerance of other kinds, which were and his basic idea was that I think this is where the part of Tagore that I wasn't so much about, but I had a paper called Tagore and His India, which came out in the New York Review of Books, which is reproduced in my book called The Argumentative Indian, where I discuss is that this is where a question of confrontation with reasoning as to why do I have this attitude. No, I think, you see, when there is a tension going on and you can detach yourself from the present conflict to an earlier conflict which has come and gone to understand what happened. We overlook the fact that most people that have been killed by identity divisions over the last 100 years have not been connected with religious division. They've been connected with nationality. The First World War was the bloodiest war imaginable. When I arrived at Trinity College, Cambridge, in 51, I guess, no, 53 I came. I see my old friend on actually think they're 53, wasn't it? I was surprised to see that in my college in Trinity, all the sides of the wall of the church were chapel, full of names of people who had died. From one college, from one age group, in one war. the extent of carnage was just unbelievable. So much so when Second World War came, the names had to be written in the anti-chapel. And now that was intolerance, but not religious intolerance. It was the Germans and the British and the French found very good reason to confront each other. And there was all this thing, there was a theory that went with it, that your big identity is your nationality, and to die for your country is a great moral thing to do. Now, when you look back on it, it seems incredible that the British, French, and Germans could have been killing each other like this with abandon. And it's certainly not religious, they share the religion, basically Christianity, even though slightly different form. So I think the thing to recognize that the vulnerability is just as reasoning is one of the assets we have. Vulnerability to instigation, to think narrowly, is also very strong. But what I try to argue in my book, which you kindly refer to, namely The Idea of Justice, there are 3 chapters on rationality, is that the remedy of bad reasoning is good reasoning. There is no other thing. And those who think that there is no reasoning, some people don't listen to reason, that's not true. When nobody comes and says, look, I don't listen to reason. There may be such a person, but I haven't met her yet. But they come and say, this is my reason. And then you have to say why it isn't a very good reason. So I think engagement in reasoning, why do you take this view, that's central. That, by the way, is a common element between this unknown Scot called Adam Smith, to which reference was made, and Rabindranath Tagore, because that question comes, they both put it in exactly the same way. He uses the device, Smith does, of the impartial spectator, how to reason about it. I quoted one part of that in the context of economics, but it's a very general point. So I would say that ultimately the thing that we get from Tagore and from Smith, and many others too, is very much connected with reasoning about everything, not letting any prejudice go past without saying why, and then saying how would you defend that argument. Now some people take the view that there's no way of victory there, because some people simply don't listen to reason. My friend Anthony Appiah, in a critique of my work, a very friendly critique, made that point, saying I overestimate reason. But I don't agree with Anthony for this reason that, it is always an opportunity to ask, okay, you say you don't listen to reasoning, but nobody says that. They said that your reasons are no good, mine is. Why do you say that? So I think the scope for engagement in reasoning exists. And one of the points that Smith does make is that people have the ability to think in a way that we tend to deeply underestimate. And that, I think, is a very big point to emerge from what is increasingly looking like a Smith-Tagore axis, generated entirely by UBC, which didn't exist earlier, an undiagnosed intellectual alliance which has emerged thanks to UBC's initiative.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Laura Lee, please join us.
Hello. Dr. Sen, I'll refer to a book that wasn't brought up yet today. In the book, Development as Freedom, you challenge us to look beyond purely economic views of development and to consider political and social unfreedoms, as you put it. Recognizing the deep social inequalities that exist between and within countries today, what do you see as the main challenges, in particular in regions such as Africa, to bringing about the realization of substantive freedoms for all people?
Yeah.
Laura, Do you have an answer to that question before you get an answer? You're waiting.
Well, I think I'd like to say three things. Very interesting question again, like the last one. I think sometimes it's difficult to place the diagnostic issue in the form of main challenges because there are many and they interrelate. And we select between the challenges only when if you did one, you couldn't do the other. It's like saying, would you like fish or meat? And, well, you could actually, I guess, eat both, but mostly you choose one. But you don't ask the question, do you like breakfast or lunch or dinner? Because you could say, well, all of them are quite nice if you can have it. So I don't really think that we should try to be too energetic in cutting down the number of challenges to make it manageable, because most things don't conflict with each other. One of the theses of the development of freedom is not so much to look beyond the economic thing, but that different kinds of freedom tend to be basically, with a few exceptions, but basically friendly to each other. That is, political freedom helps you to run a better kind of an economy through critique. I have a paper coming out, and it's already out by the current number of the New York Review. It's called India and China, where I discuss the role that democracy plays and what the limitations are as well as what the achievements are from seen in that perspective. So I think we could see the connection of political freedom with economic freedom. In the case of China, many of the things they have done are better than Indians. On the other hand, there's a kind of fragility when they collapsed as they did during the Great Leap Forward, creating the gigantic, that largest famine in history. For 3 years, there was no critique, and the absence of political freedom had an enormous economic impact. Similarly, in '79, when the Chinese, after having rejected the market economy altogether, suddenly decided they want to go whole hog in that direction and moved away from the market economy towards market economy in agriculture with great success, with industry with pretty good success, and with healthcare. They insisted everyone has to buy health insurance, and one stroke they moved from a Canada type system to an America type system, which in this context wasn't an improvement. And suddenly you can see the demographic figures, how what China had achieved founded. And then, of course, by now they've recognized that something has gone wrong. I'm very privileged. They're very tolerant. I'm quite critical of China, and yet they do. I chair the advisory board of the Peking University's Development Institute. So we have discussed that issue in Peking University a lot. The Chinese, you can't get it into a democratic mode, into party politics in the way in India I would. But on the other hand, intellectuals are ready to discuss it, and the government servants ready to discuss it. It's not like other authoritarian regimes like Burma or North Korea. People are interested in these arguments. So I think you have to see how, what the power of reasoning is, how the power of reasoning is relating political freedom to economic freedom to other kinds of social freedom. If you take gender, how the ability, for example, for women to earn an independent income could make a big difference. We were quite surprised when we were studying fertility differences in India between about 400 districts, that the only two factors that were predictive of low fertility was women's education, which is an educational, cultural factor, and women's gainful employment. That was the only significant factor. There were no other part of significant. The one indicates how culture and education makes a difference, and the other how women's independent voice, ability not just as marshalling resources at home, but quote-unquote that mystique about bread earner could be absorbed by women too, made a big difference. So this world is very complicated and related, very much the interdisciplinary subject. Where are you here? We're looking at. So I would say the thing to look at is not to prioritize them, see them together. The fact that the Cold War was fought on Africa, and that every time a military dictator replaced a legitimate government, it either had the support of the United States or the Soviet Union, played havoc with the politics of Africa, which played havoc with the economics of Africa, and healthcare in Africa, with social services in Africa. So I think it's integrated. This is a subject. And your answer is, I think this is a planted question. Paul planted it. This is a phrase of interdisciplinary research. That's what it is, yeah. You're in the interdisciplinary. I can see that you. I think Paul is absolutely successful in brainwashing you. But I'm also brainwashed in that direction, so we agree. Thank you.
Dr. Sen, do you think we're more effective at planting questions with our students at UBC than yours would be at Harvard? No, no brainwashing. We have a third student from the interdisciplinary graduate studies program who has been reading very widely in your work. And Rajdeep Singh Gill will give you the third pitch. We've had one down the middle of the plate, one down the left side. Where are you going to throw the ball? Come.
Hi, Dr. Sen. One of many aspects of your work I find heartening is a capacious and rich understanding of human lives. It's there in Tagore's work and Smith's work, and I see it present in all of your work as well. And it would be wonderful to hear some of the distillation of your deep reflections on how feeling, thinking, and acting together beyond self-interest, and valuing a just and sustainable present and future are an essential aspect of human freedom. Yes. The question came out of, there's a section on sustainability in the environment and the idea of justice. And you mentioned how a lot of sustainability arguments are around meeting our needs and raising living standards. Yet you said we have reason to value more than that. And that's an essential aspect of human freedom. So that's the part I wanted to hear more about.
Yeah. Okay. The wonderful thing about reasoning, of course, is, I don't want to embarrass you. Do you want to go and sit there next to the president? No. This is good. I'm very afraid of you falling down. You see? I can't relax here.
Down here, right?
Thank you. Okay.
I was nervous coming up the stairs.
Okay, all right, thank you. I think the great thing about reasoning is that you can reason on any subject. Take self-interest. There is a reason for self-interest. Why are you doing it? And, it's reasonable for me to do, given where my life goes and so on. But we can also say, is that the only thing we are concerned with? So reasoning has that unrestricted quality, which, by the way, is one of the points that Tagore is very good at, extraordinarily good at. But that also allows us to think, when we're thinking not just about our self-interest, about the world, not just the world as it is going today, but as it might go in the future. And the question there isn't. You see, there is sometimes a confusion when people say, but I know we are all very concerned about the future, but we have no reason to be concerned about the future because we won't be there. Now, this is a contradiction because the fact that we are concerned indicates that there is a concern there to which we can take note and ask, A, why are we concerned? And second, what are we going to do about it? Let me turn, and that's my second part, since you brought in the environment issue, illustrate my point by saying what went wrong with Copenhagen. I went on saying from the summer of that year that it would be a disastrous failure. The reason is, and this is the subject matter of the book, that you need public reasoning before you can take a decision. The European had a plan in which priority for emission control was extraordinary. And we can understand that. Chinese were very concerned that while they were underdeveloped, the Europeans and Americans were polluting the world. And the moment the Chinese started polluting, they said the rules of the game are changed. And they didn't think that's a very good idea. And they had a different way of thinking about it. And the Americans were trying to figure out how to think about it. I don't think they went much beyond that. But the result of that was that there were alternative visions. When you have alternative visions, you have to discuss it. This idea that people get together in Copenhagen and hit out a contract is absolutely ridiculous. You don't get a contract until you have figured out what the issues are, debated on it, and ultimately the Chinese may make some compromise, the European may have to make some compromise. But in the absence of it, you couldn't do it. So the entire survival of the environment, species, and all those issues really turned on being able to put it on the horizon of discussion. And what we had in Copenhagen is contract seeking rather than reasoning. So what I'm trying to argue is to deal with it here is the reasoning that has to be the central thing that is there. And that includes, by the way, animals, because when people say, my life wouldn't be affected by that, but that really underestimates me. I mean, I think I don't want spotted owls, as I think I discussed in my book, I don't want spotted owls to become extinct, because I think it would be a terrible thing if it did. But that's not because spotted owls affect my life. I don't think I've encountered one, I don't think I've ever seen one. And I would be perfectly happy to go to grave without actually seeing one. On the other hand, I can take the view as a human being with ability to think, that would be a terrible thing to happen. So we are not restricted in a way that all these other models, including Bentham and self-interest, libertarians with their narrow thing are. I think the great merit, and here I'm with Smith here, is that your ability to examine and these different reasons and see why is it that it appeals to some. And it's the same question I was answering earlier in dealing with the issue of the First World War and the religious things now. To ask the question, why? Why do you want to, why should... I think there are some things that we would have rejected. I don't think one line of Chinese thinking, I think, would not have survived, to which actually Indians played a kind of supportive role, namely that Europeans have polluted the world, there has to be some kind of a penalty for that. I think one thing that we have learned from Nelson Mandela and Bishop Tutu is that that's not the way to think about past injustices. You're not going to... Those who did that, they're gone, completely gone. And so it's not so much that you want to somehow compensate for that. But as Bishop Tutu said famously, dealing with apartheid, that the impact of that past is present today. Whites own most of the assets. Blacks have educational disadvantage, health disadvantage, cultural disadvantage. That's present, that's today. So my guess is that if there had been debates on that more extensively and more fully, and I think the world hasn't really figured that out adequately, we could have arrived at a contract which would have been based on some kind of an understanding. Of course, America has the problem that even if the president agrees, that doesn't mean that he's in a position to put it through. But my guess there is, and this is not the occasion, and I'm going over my time. I think Paul is watching at the watch actually already. That I think if you think about why this division has come, I think on the healthcare debate, I think the administration lost out when after its remarkable electoral success and public engagement, it actually let the initiative of healthcare debate go entirely on the other side. And so by the time they were entering, so many wrong things people did believe, absolutely false things people believed, that, the death panel and that National Health Service, you would never have a choice of a doctor, and so on. That was very difficult. They were just trying to say, these are not true. But they couldn't. You get a bit of time, and if you have to spend most of the time saying these are not true, you don't get around to saying, however, these are the important arguments. You never got that. So the agenda was determined by the Republicans. So I think the real lesson here is that not only reasoning is important, if you want to win a debate in a way that others see as reasonable, and ultimately in a democratic society, obviously, and in a small way, even in non-democratic society, it plays a part. The fact that authoritarian countries imprison so many of the dissidents indicates that they're afraid of reasoning. When people say that Iranians don't take individual freedom seriously, I would be more convinced if they didn't have to imprison anyone who takes individual freedom seriously from it. So I think you have to really see what the role of reasoning is, and speed is important, engagement is important. So I think you're pointing to a hugely important area of what I think are central issues that we face in the contemporary world. So thank you.
You know, we have more questions, but we don't have time. Another occasion when we have you back, we want you to talk about earthquakes. Something much on the mind of us in where we live on this part of the ocean, but because of what has happened in Japan. And the debate that you once analyzed between Tagore and Mahatma Gandhi on the Bihar earthquake of 1934. Perhaps that's a topic for another occasion that we can find a student where next time I will prompt them to come into a question. But thank you. Thank you so much on this part. Provost Farrar, please.
Thank you, Paul, Aisan, Laura, Rajdeep, and of course, thank you, Dr. Sen. This brings our ceremonies to a close. I want to thank you all for coming and for joining us on this very special occasion. And you're asked to please remain in your seats while the academic procession leaves the theater. Thank you.